You don't have to be an executive to exhibit executive presence. Hi, I'm Véronique De Prycker, and when I started my career as a junior accountant working for what is now known as one of the big four companies, I experienced firsthand the difference between having or not having executive presence. It changed my career forever, and now you're probably curious about what executive presence really is and why you should exhibit it even if you're not an executive. On May 23rd, together with Big View, I'll be doing a workshop on this topic. So if you want to find out what it is exactly and how you can use it to propel your business or your career, then be sure to join us and ask me your questions.
Hello and welcome to our Big View workshop today. I'm so delighted to be here with you all today and our special guest talking all about executive presence. Please add in the chat where you're joining us from. I see, we have hi from Andalusia, looking forward to learning from this session, wanting to derive motivation today. Where else are you all joining us from? I am coming from Raleigh, North Carolina, which is on the East Coast of the United States. Rhonda, hello from Florida. Where else do we have people coming in from today? Anyhow, continue to add in the chat where you're arriving from and joining us from, as well as that is a place where we can have questions for our wonderful guest today. Oh, here we go. Otis from Woodstock, Georgia. Jerry Cook from Rockwell, Texas, right by DFW. All right, very good. So today, our workshop topic is you don't need to be an executive to exhibit executive presence, how to increase your chances at all times and on any occasions. This is something that every one of us, no matter where you are in your career, can benefit from. And our special guest today is Véronique De Prycker. As a junior CPA at a big four company, Véronique never had any problem when advising her clients, while all her junior colleagues experienced that clients went over their heads to ask the manager if their advice was legitimate. With only a few months in the company, she got the chance to work with the most prestigious accounts, like a worldwide supplier and even a royal family. She also became the youngest CPA in her country, the youngest female CPA, that is, at the time, and got fairly easily promoted. She also became well known in the financial world, but there was something else that made that difference. Later on, she reflected on what exactly made that difference between her and her skilled and intelligent junior colleagues. The answer was that she had an X factor. You've probably heard that terminology before, that some of her colleagues missed. And in the professional terminology, that X factor can be described as executive presence. So please welcome to the stage, Véronique De Prycker. And just so you know, we will have a special giveaway from Véronique at the end of this session, as well as a special giveaway from Big View. So you want to stay with us to the end. Hello, Véronique.
Hi, Sharon. And I'm joining everyone from Antwerp, the city of diamonds and chocolate and fashion in Belgium.
Oh, I love it. It sounds very cosmopolitan and glamorous, full of people with executive presence, I bet.
Well, maybe, yes. We have a very cosmopolitan city. That's true. Apparently, our mayor says that we have more nationalities than New York. I don't know if that's true, but it's amazing, right? We have a lot of nationalities here. So yeah, it's cool to be here.
Excellent. For our guests attending from all over the world, we want to let you know that you can add your chats or questions into the chat box, and we will make sure that Véronique will get to answer those questions. So let's go ahead and get started with the basics. Executive presence kind of seems like this term that we all would aspire to have that as a descriptor, But in a sense, down to the practical points of it, Veronique, what is having executive presence?
It's actually, at first, it looks quite intangible, right? Like you said in presentation at the beginning, it's that it factor, the X factor, like the X factor for performance. When you see it, you know that people have it. It's that je ne sais quoi, as the French would describe it. It's a set of qualities and characteristics and behaviors that project a sense of leadership. It's kind of a heady combination of confidence and poise and credibility and authenticity that convinces the rest of us that we're in the presence of someone who's the real deal. Now, that all sounds very woolly, right? So, to make it more concrete, we see that executive presence rests on three pillars: how we act, which is called our gravitas, how we speak, our communication, and how we look, our appearance. This makes it already a bit more tangible, although you can see that these three pillars are quite huge containers themselves, right?
You could have a talk on each one of those, right?
Yes.
Now, the
It's,
appearance part, Veronique, I want to really break that piece down because I think there are different ways that people perceive and view appearance. How you look, your appearance. What exactly does that mean? Because it can seem almost like shallow if you don't dig deeper.
sure, absolutely. Because how can appearance be more important than knowledge and skills, right? Well, I have live examples. I had a certain moment, a friend of mine from high school, she was in line for a promotion at her company, also one in the financial sector, slightly different than one of the big four companies that I worked for. It was more like gathering data of companies that the company does. And I mean, she had all the experience. She possessed the right skills. She had the right experience, though she still dressed as though she were 18
Ah,
in a faded polo shirt, not good fitting jeans, and worn out flat shoes. And so her manager said, or the director even, he said, well, you know, you don't get the promotion because, yeah, you lack the right maturity.
so the way she dressed was immediately tied to her maturity or maybe seasoning.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And still, if we look at research that measures, I mean, really asks questions like, what do you value the most? Is it how people behave? Is it how people communicate? Is it how people appear? Then, of course, the third always gets the least quotes, like a percentage between, am I still here?
You are.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It was like my computer went shut down. So the latter always get the least points between, well, differs from research to research, but it can be even less than 8% out of the total. Now, if we show real life situations, then the whole percentages, they differ, because one of the most striking research on this topic is from a female researcher at the University of London, and she showed silent videos of pianists performing in international competitions to a sample audience of 1,000 people, and they picked out the winner more accurately than the audience who could also hear the soundtrack. So even in musical performances, the appearance of the performer played a major role. So can you imagine what people would think of us if they would see us in ill-fitting clothes, for example, clothes that are too tight or clothes that are too loose, or when we have out of control facial hair, like visible nose hair or eyebrows that look like worn out brushes. I mean, you have numerous, yeah, I mean, you have numerous small details, but it also always needs to be put into context, because
Sure.
um, a few weeks ago, I did my first TEDx talk, and with me on stage, well, one of the other speakers was a math professor from Oxford University. And you would think a professor, he dresses in a certain way, right? Now, Tom, who was a professor, he has a lot of tattoos. He wears skinny jeans. He wears sneakers, and he wears a t-shirt. But for a mathematics professor, I mean, he's attracting youngsters who all of a sudden mathematics become more exciting. You see, so it always has to be seen in context.
With your audience, potentially, who is in the room, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Veronica, I wonder, and I'm generalizing, but it appears to me that over the last couple of decades, the way we dress for work has certainly become more casual, more business casual. But many of us probably heard our parents say, dress for the job you want, not the one you have. And then COVID blows everything up, where all of a sudden we're only dressing from the waist up and we're rolling around in yoga clothes the rest of the time. So now it's okay, things have changed again. But then, as you mentioned, Veronica, a math professor appealing to so a different generation of younger students. If we think about Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, his norm is jeans, t-shirt, and a hoodie. But then when he had to testify in front of US Congress, he put the suit on, right? So contextual, your environment. Is that how you would also explain how appearance really is an important pillar of executive
Absolutely.
presence?
Yes. I have another real life example from myself, actually, for that matter. When I left my corporate job at a big four company, I started working at the dredging company on overseas projects, and I worked on Balearic project or on the Balearic Islands, and I worked even on the Panama Canal. And what we have there is, so we have the office, the head office, and as a financial manager, I was mostly in the office, of course, but we have on-site, onshore, and also offshore. Do we have people working for us at that same project? Now, I find it as a financial manager, it was important for me to know what was going on site. So I frequented the on-site side, but also I visited the ships and the vessels. You can imagine that I didn't wear the same clothes going to the office or going to the site. On top of that, of course, I had to keep a certain security things in mind, like wearing a helmet, wearing a fluorescent jacket, and wearing these boots with tips that are protecting my feet from falling something on it. So that also makes a difference. But of course, I dress the part. That's actually what is most important. Dress the part, whether your sector is in building and in construction is different from when going to a client at a certain moment when you need to when you need to talk to bankers. So it's important that you, of course, respect your own personality to a certain extent, and then you also adjust to the situation and the context and the people that you're going to talk to.
That's an incredibly important thing. I will say that for younger people who are just starting off in their careers, there may be this pressure to try and be more seasoned looking, and whether it's cutting your hair or wearing different kind of clothing. I will say, I'll give you a quick example. Veronica, I spent 25 years as a television journalist. And when I was a baby journalist, 21 years old, right out of college, I got my first big assignment to cover a terrible flood in North Florida. I mean, entire towns were decimated. And I showed up to cover the flood wearing high heels, pantyhose, and a silk dress. I couldn't have stuck out more awkwardly than anything. The photographer showed up and said, "Where are you going?" It was so wrong because I was 21 trying to get credibility and authoritativeness. And I thought, well, if I dress up, having zero thought about the environment in which I was going to be. So yes, there are many times when you have to be really, thoughtful about that. So I think that is a great way to think about it. Another thing, speaking about generation, in your notes, you had said that executive presence has nothing to do with a title, a function, or an age. And I think that people, when they think executive presence, they think of like older, more mature, very accomplished people. But young people can have executive presence too. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was my first experience with that because, as you said in the intro, I was not even a junior CPA. So I was not even certified as a public accountant. I was still simply an accountant. I was studying for my title as a CPA. And I started in that Big Four company in February. And they told me, Veronique, listen, in the first year, don't count on the fact that you will visit our clients alone. And I said, that's okay. I'm here to learn. I was very young. And so that was February. On May 2nd, and I know it's May 2nd because the 1st of May is a public holiday in my country. So May 2nd, I was alone in front of a client looking in their books.
They obviously thought you had what it takes.
Yes. And that was, only later, a few months later, then at the end of that year, my personal mentor, he gave me all those big accounts because he trusted me. And he took them away from a colleague who had 5 years more experience than I had. And at that same time, junior colleagues start asking me questions like, do your clients believe when you give them advice? And I looked at them like, yes, of course. Right. Yeah, why not? They said, well, they never believe me. They always go over my head and they ask our manager. It never happened to me. And I think it was because I dressed the part. Indeed, I dressed for the function that I was aspiring. But I didn't overdress, although slightly overdressed, not like the case you mentioned. Oh my gosh, poor you. I can imagine how you must have felt at that moment, like, what am I doing here in my silk dress? But slightly overdressed is better than being underdressed.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, you have to take into account the situation and the audience and that or the people that you're speaking with or that you're dealing with. And having a mentor at that moment and even being able to ask questions or looking around, what are the unwritten rules in this sector? What are the unwritten rules in this niche or in this profession? For example, when I was working for a company in Luxembourg, where you have this a big financial center also, I could see that the accountant that I was speaking with, a young girl, that normally she had piercings and that she wore different clothes during the weekend, and now she was in a suit and she had taken off her piercings, right? So it really depends whom you're talking to and in which sector you're working and what you aspire yourself.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean that people have to throw away their personal style or interests. You can still put on decent, nice, ironed clothing that looks like you took a minute. Prior to the pandemic, I had a lot of junior members of our staff at a digital marketing agency that I ran, and the graphic designers with purple hair, blue hair, green hair, piercings all over the place. That is fine. But when a client was coming to the office, it was important that they looked the part as well. During the week when there was no clients around, they wore yoga pants and torn t-shirts and tie-dye. But we got bitten one time because we had a non-planned client visit, and in came the client, and here was our crew of super creative people. And I was hesitant to do the big introduction because I didn't want there to be an assumption that these people weren't professional. They were incredibly professional. But at that moment, this client was going to meet these graphic designers that were producing beautiful work for him. But I didn't want to do the big introduction until the next time when I could give a heads up and say, listen, no yoga clothes and tie-dye for this next meeting. Please dress in business clothing, and let's go with that. And like you said, I would rather be a tiny bit overdressed than the underdressed person in the room.
Sure. That's why it might be in such a case, I always give the advice to have a wardrobe, not really a wardrobe, but at least one outfit hanging there in the office so you can change. I mean, that's also something that men who need to go, or women who need to go to an evening event, then they can quickly change their shirt, a new shirt, putting on a new shirt, freshening up a little bit, or just simply, for example, changing a jacket, going from a formal jacket or a less formal jacket, like, for example, maybe a leather jacket on a nice pair of pants with a nice blouse. And then if you change that jacket, leather jacket, into a normal jacket like you are wearing right now, it completely changes. And that's how you can go through your day, meeting different people on different topics and dressing the part always.
Very good. Well, if there are no questions in the chat that I'm not seeing at this point, I do like what one of our folks says: conclusion, dress to impress. But of course, keeping in mind the environment, right? That's actually a great summary. What I'd like to move on now is to the next pillar of gravitas, which is this. In the United States, Veronica, we would say that's a great SAT word. The SAT word is the exam that you take to get into college and university in the United States. But it seems like one of those words that you might not use in day-to-day conversation, but there's an element of X factor with gravitas. So how would you describe gravitas and what it means to have that?
It's a huge container, of course. It's how we behave, how we act, what we do. And for example, think of a CEO who calls people unexpectedly to a meeting, even on a Sunday, whether they have family gatherings or not. And he doesn't compensate for the extra hours. Do you think he's respected? Or is he rather feared? And would people go the extra mile for him if there is a huge emergency and maybe he's in trouble? Or wouldn't they? So the behavior, it's in so many little details. It's about being honest, not even telling a white lie, even if you think like, oh, I don't even want to go into the nitty-gritty of things and just, waving it off with a white lie, or sending someone away with just a silly story. It's not because you are in a certain function and it's not because you have responsibility that people will just take anything. You always have to take into account that every person at every level is actually very intelligent in their own way. So you can never underestimate how you treat them. And you can at least treat others as you want to be treated, but better is to treat others as they would like to be treated,
Mm.
because then you're really taking interest in them. And then, because what I see, even in my function, what I'm doing here right now, I'm simply, or I consider myself simply like a medium that is passing on my knowledge. It's not about me. It's about all the people that are online right now, or people that will view it later on, for example. So it's about them. It's always about the other person. It's always what is in it for them. What can I do for them? That's how your behavior in general should be based upon, I believe. And then you can make great connections and a great impression.
And as you very nicely explained, gravitas is an entire bucket full of many, many things. But the behavior piece, the behavior of a leader, and what does that mean to you? And what are the various elements? And I'd like to ask in the chat for you to participate. What would be descriptors or characterizations of someone that you would describe as a leader with gravitas, someone who behaves the way that you would aspire to be as a leader one day? Please add in the chat. We'd love some interaction from you.
Yeah, I'm curious indeed. Yeah. Well, I see that Rhonda says would also apply to how we speak. Well, since communication, Rhonda, is one of the three pillars, then the speaking part, I would rather, of course, categorize that under communication, but it's also a little bit connected. Those three pillars are actually also intertwined. That's for sure. Yes.
Anybody would you, I think for me, I think a really strong leader that to me demonstrates having gravitas is a leader who listens well and can read the room rather than just splurting out all of these various instructions or without really getting any feedback. Oh, here we go. Yvonne, someone known for their kindness as well as their wisdom. Yes, wisdom. And I think about Veronique. Wisdom sometimes gets closely associated with age, but there are plenty of young people with wisdom. I think about Malala Yousaf, the amazing young woman who was shot in the head by the Taliban and survived, and then spoke at the United Nations as a teenager and won a Nobel Prize as a teenager. The amount of gravitas and executive presence that she displayed is monumental. Would you agree, Veronique?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's like maybe she had an old soul because she had already a lot of wisdom at that young age. So age is not always an indicator. What it might be is that some people today miss experience what older people have. So those two combined together is even more important, right? But yeah, young age can equal a lot of knowledge already. Absolutely. Yeah. And
I like this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
One comment here: a good leader can marry empathy and authority. It is a difficult balance, which is why only a few people can do it. That is an excellent descriptor, I would say.
Yes.
Someone else saying good listener showing respect to other people. Thank you, Ingrid.
Commanding a room is one of the characteristics that you need to be able to do as a good leader with a lot of executive presence. And so commanding a room is actually having that authority, natural authority, without expressing that authority, or without having to express that authority. It's what Margaret Thatcher used to say: if you have to say your name at a round table, it means you don't already are where you should be, because then it means that they don't already know you enough to know who you are and what you represent, what you stand for.
Okay. And we do have it. Yeah, I see Robert put engage with your audience, speaking well, and eye content. So that's where that gravitas really is interconnected with the communication piece, which of course is the appearance piece, how we look when we're speaking. Do we look comfortable in our own skin, or do we look terrified? Right. So what that leads me also to think about gravitas, which I feel like knowledge, knowing your craft, having that experience is important. But how does that then tie into, and what is the difference between having a personal brand? Because I feel like having gravitas gives you an element of being a thought leader, but then that's also like a synonym for personal brand. Is there a difference?
Very good question. And I have a slight different interpretation, or I see it differently than the books. Because when you would read the narrow interpretation of both terms, executive presence and personal branding, then so-called, or it is said that personal branding is more towards the outside, or outside of the company, or with other people than your stakeholders. And executive presence is supposed to be only with the stakeholders. Now, in my opinion, you cannot divide those two. So what I always do in my mentorship, the personal brand or the personal branding is always a part of the whole thing that we see around executive presence. So for me, it's a part of it, but not everybody may agree to that. But that's my interpretation, because we cannot simply leave our executive presence at the company when we step outside of the office, or when we go to an event or whatever. No, on the contrary, we still need it there too. And it's offline, it's online, it's in speaking engagements, it's in internal speeches that you give, it's in online communications like we have now on video. So it's always there, and you always need both.
Sure, sure. And oftentimes I feel like personal brand, if you were to look at a Venn diagram, is marrying how others see you and how you see yourself. In that middle area is what your brand, how you appear to the world potentially.
Hopefully there is that middle point indeed, because if the two are far apart, then you have a real problem. But I think that Jeff Bezos said it best. He said, like, a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And so
Yes.
if that interpretation of your presentation fits what you really meant to communicate through gravitas, through communication, and through your appearance, then those two, then you're on point. Absolutely.
Robert put in the chat, personal branding is for trying to sell or maybe market yourself, not necessarily the subject matter, but maybe yourself as the thought leader on that subject matter, which that's certainly, yeah, because there's lots of different thought leaders on any topic you could think of. But how do you stand out?
True. Yes, absolutely. Well, you said it. You need to be excellent at what you do. That's a first requisite, I believe. Absolutely. You need to be excellent at what you do. And then on top of that, you always want to make the best possible impression in any situation and in any occasion, at any occasion. And that needs to be, I mean, it's not that you just appear better than you are for once. No. It needs to be a natural behavior. And it needs to be that whenever people see you, maybe even when you go for your groceries, that they see the same sort of attitude than when they see you on a stage.
Yeah, who you are through and through. We had a couple more entries here when we asked about what attributes you would see as having a leader with gravitas. I like what Rhonda said. Respectful, offers growth and advancement opportunities for employees. And that's really a good leader takes care of their team and helps them do their job better. And that would require intense respect and opportunities for your team's growth.
Absolutely. A good leader surrounds himself with people that are better at what they do. Because as a leader, you can't do everything yourself. On the contrary, you need to be good as a leader, and surrounding yourself with people that are good at certain topics that are necessary to build the success of the company or to build your success as a leader. So yeah, you need to surround yourself with very intelligent people who are excellent at in their field of expertise.
As we move on through the pillars, we've talked about appearance, we've talked about gravitas. I'd like to talk a little bit now about the communication piece and what your priorities are when thinking about having executive presence as it relates to communication.
I think the first is literally your language, how you speak. Do you speak slang a lot? Do you use a lot of slang? Do you have heavy dialect, for example? I had a colleague, and he's very knowledgeable in his field of expertise, and but he is from a certain region in our country that is known for their heavy dialects. And so he wanted to expand his business to a neighboring country that also speaks the same language, slightly different, sort of like American English and English. And so he gave a lot of free keynotes, a lot of free speeches, but he had that accent. And at first, it's quite funny to listen to someone with a peculiar accent or who has a cute way of speaking. But it soon becomes very frustrating if people simply can't understand you. And so that's what happened to him. So it failed. Expanding his business to that neighboring country just failed because people simply couldn't understand him. And that's what is bothering people. It's when you speak a lot of slang, when you speak with a heavy accent, when your voice is, for example, perceived as too mousy or too raspy or too shrill, especially for women. It's a disadvantage if you have a voice that is too shrill. And the problem there is people won't tell you because they don't dare to tell you.
How would one have the self-awareness to understand how they sound? Do they record themselves? Do they ask a peer or a supervisor for very, very frank, open feedback? How would you determine this?
Well, I think you and I both know that the first time or the first year maybe that we heard ourselves on video or on television, you probably were terrified about your own voice because it's different when you hear it on a screen. So it's not really a good indicator. Might be a bit of an indicator, but not really the best indicator. I think if you've never ever heard that someone likes your voice, that is already an indicator. And then, of course, the third step is asking someone to give you honest feedback, and ask someone who has the best of interest in you, because otherwise it might be that they are maybe envious of your success and then they give you bad feedback, while in fact you should receive normal or good feedback. So also the person that you can ask that question needs to be a bit neutral, but not negative about you, right?
I will say that, there are a couple of considerations when thinking about if you have a heavy accent, that it can be a difficult challenge to try and change that, but it can be done. And if you really want to aspire to change the way you speak, hiring a voice coach can certainly do that. I know that when I was much younger, I spoke at a much higher register and I sounded a bit mousy. And in college, I had a professor who said, "My goal for you, Sharon, is for you to lower your speaking voice by a full octave And if you ever studied music, that's 8 notes. That's pretty significant. From August to December, our homework every week was to read a newspaper into a cassette. Now, many of you probably don't even know what a cassette is, but nowadays it would be like your phone. Read and into that cassette, and then we had to bring the cassette, and then they would play it back during class. And over the course of 4 months, I changed my speaking voice from here to here. And it is no surprise that I would end up seeking a career as a broadcast journalist where my voice is my instrument. It can be done with focused work. I see that there are people here who are adding in the chat that they've spoken with voice coaches. They can do wonders. They can also help you to lessen an accent if English is not your first language, or you're living in another country and you're trying to learn their language. I'm sure, though, Veronique, I can't even imagine how many languages you speak. I'm always so impressed. 5? Oh my gosh! 5 languages. Here in the United States, we speak Northern, Southern, and Western. Oh Lord, all of the same.
Yes. But it's true what you say. Most people think like, okay, this is my voice. No. Your vocal cords are surrounded by and connected to muscles. And since every muscle in our body can be trained, so can our vocal cords. So lowering your, like you said, your voice, your tone, and the tonality and the tone of voice, those are 2 different things. And you can really start to play with it. Absolutely. Yeah. I had the privilege of having a teacher when I was 11 asking me if I wanted to perform for our director who was going to leave at the end of that school year. And she was all into poetry. And so my teacher asked me if I wanted to perform something on stage for her. So we worked privately for a year, and then we even continued for 5 more years doing even a theater play, because it was so much fun. And yeah, that was, now if I look back on it, I mean, it was a free training that it would have cost me a lot of money nowadays.
Indeed. Yeah, and that is something that, we all can. Maybe there is a local theater, community theater group that you could join and start to work and explore the variances of your voice, and how that you really have a lot more control of it than you realize. As Veronique said, it's a muscle. It has range. You can certainly change the way you sound. Now, leading into the next piece, so we talked about appearance, gravitas, and communication. Is executive presence an inherent trait? Are some people born with it, or can you learn the whole bit, all of it?
It can be learned and it can't be learned. I would say yes and no, because it's true that some people are born with a natural talent. Take a musician, a singer. Some people have the talent because they're simply born with it, but it doesn't mean that they still need to practice a lot and learn a lot of theory and do the right things with their voice, and even have a voice coach so that they don't stress their voice too much, even if they were born with the talent. Now, take someone else who's not really born with that natural talent, but who has the desire to sing, and they take lessons and they develop their voice with the right teaching and with the right teachers. So they both can reach a certain level. And maybe the person who's not born with the talent but did a lot of practice can even become better with the person who has the natural talent but didn't do anything with it later on to develop it. But if you have someone who is born with the talent and who develops it, there's still, of course, a little bit of an advancement there for them who are born with a natural talent. And it's the same with sportsmen, and it's the same with leaders, and it's the same with people who either have and are born with executive presence or not. For example, in my case, if my parents wouldn't have, during my upbringing, wouldn't have taught me like a gazillion etiquette rules, I would never have been able to work with that royal family. I mean, my manager or my mentor would never have given me that account. But those rules, every etiquette rule, I mean, I know even my big toe knows about all those rules, so to speak. So it has become very natural because it was sort of injected in my DNA, because I was taught all those rules from a very early age. If I wouldn't have known them, maybe I could have had that natural presence. But if I wouldn't have known those rules, then I wouldn't have been able to be with ministers and people. Well, to be honest, I even met a president of North Macedonia yesterday. So it's funny what kind of opportunities you get
Sure.
when you have that presence.
Indeed. Now, what is the role that body language and cultural differences have in developing executive presence? Because there are some different rules about that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm sure that maybe not everybody here in the audience will work or is working internationally, but could be that, for example, you, Sharon, suppose that you never leave your town. And there is, for example, a Japanese embassy that is inviting you. The rules to go to an event, such a mixer, within the Japanese culture is totally different from our Western manners and our Western customs. So even then, it's handy to know that even the measurements of the business cards, the way you hand them over, the way you have to look at and examine them when they are handed over to you, the timing when they are handed over, it's all completely different. So if you don't know that, you would make a blunder. I mean, it would always follow you around, right? The same, for example, if you're a man and you would work in the London financial district, it's a real no-go to wear brown shoes. Now, if you would do that as someone who's not aware, I mean, you would stay the laugh of the town for the rest of your life, right?
Why?
Simply because
what's wrong with brown shoes?
I don't know. I forgot, because I'm not a man, so and I don't have a client right now in that financial district, for example. But I know that there was a reason, and I forgot about the reason. But it's simply a custom that you do not wear brown shoes in the financial district in London. Yeah. So.
Wow. So there are definitely things that you can prepare for.
Absolutely.
Now, the last piece before we finish up our time together. We are now living in a world where many of our meetings and communication take place online, very much like what we're doing right now. How can we also exhibit executive presence during a virtual communication?
That's a great question. And yes, everybody knows somehow that there is an importance in there, because sometimes we even speak for the first time with an important prospect or an important client via this medium, via video. So how do you connect and how do you make that great first impression? I think you, Sharon, are also a very great example, because like we have taken care of our background, right? We are sitting in the right position, meaning that there is not too much air above our head. We show hands. We look in the camera. The camera is at the height of our eyes. So those are, because I can even go on for an hour if it's about having that great first impression and keeping and making a great connection via video. One last important one is, maybe you've seen it, how I started our communication, or how I started our conversation here at the beginning. I waved at you. And waving, at first, it looks a bit ridiculous, but once you are accustomed to it, and when you know the psychology behind it, because what do we normally do if we meet someone in person? We shake hands, right?
Hands. Yeah.
Yes, and shaking hands already, because we touch each other, there is an exchange of chemicals, or at least some chemicals kick in, the feel-good chemicals. And so the waving with a smile and saying hi to the other person is almost the same as shaking a hand.
I love that. Okay. Now, how would you translate that to a very serious business meeting? For example, I work with multiple clients who are in the C-suite, who do presentations for boards, board of governors, board of trustees. And I don't know if I would be able to convince this one CEO to wave at the board when beginning a presentation online. What would be something that you would recommend for that?
The male version of this could be just, hi, everyone.
Oh, there. Hi, everyone. Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yes, yes. And if he would know that the psychology behind it, that it's so valuable for the other people, that they are seen, that they feel seen, and that they sort of have some kind of contact, that's how it feels to them. So I believe you might be able to transfer at least that importance, and then he might start to practice with it, maybe with you or with his colleagues internally, just to find out how it feels. But I'm sure that he can find his own habit in that. Yeah, but it doesn't need to be like this. I mean, it's more
Sure. Just
feminine.
that. Hello,
Yes,
everybody.
just
Oh,
that.
that's
Hello, everyone. How are you
okay.
doing? Yeah.
That's not over the top. That's
No.
okay. Now, is there something where, and I like how you explained using the hands, because some people are afraid to use their hands when they're speaking. And in a virtual world, what I like to do, and I have the benefit of having done television news for many years, so I have this as part of my background, but I don't like to be way too close on calls. Nobody needs that much up close. I
Yeah.
like to sit further back so that I can use my hands, because I've read that when you show your hands, you're also showing a little bit of vulnerability and showing that you're an approachable person. If you sat on your hands and didn't move them at all, it might make your delivery more stoic or stilted.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. Showing hands, like you said, it's showing vulnerability, but it enhances the trustworthiness, because people start to trust you. Now, there is a difference, because showing your hands like this is different than showing your hands like this,
Mm.
or pointing with the fingers is even
Ah,
worse.
yeah.
Yes. So showing hands is not equal. So it's better that you open your palms, because that's, of course, yeah, in the old ages, that's where you show
Yeah.
that you trust the other person, because they can hit you here and then you bleed dead. So showing your hands like this is the best way. And what you said is correct. You need to keep a distance that you would also normally do in an offline meeting, which is for our region in the West, 50 centimeters.
Oh,
In China or in Japan, because they have a much larger population on a smaller piece of land, so to speak. So they are used to be closer towards each other. So they are used to like 30 centimeters. But for us, it would be very uncomfortable.
oh,
So,
a lot of
and you
close
also,
talkers.
sorry?
A lot of close talkers for any
Yes,
Seinfeld fans.
yes. Yes, indeed. But even on screen, it's terrible when someone is so close that
Way
they're
too
right
close.
in your face. So, and you can't, I mean, it doesn't help that you put your computer like 1 meter away because they're still on that screen. So it's too impressive for the other person if you come too close. So an arm's length is actually a good way
Oh,
to measure
that's a
that.
good measurement of it. Oh, very nice.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, well, we are starting to wrap up our time. And if there are any last questions, please pop them in the chat. But at this point, we would like to go ahead and tell you about the special offer that Veronique has for us today. Fire away, Veronique.
Well, you've also already heard that offline networking is, of course, a very important part of showing yourself, making your brand, and also showing executive presence. And I meet a lot of people that are sometimes they think that networking is very icky. And because I also work with a lot of more introverted people, so they always want to know the nitty gritty of how it works. So I have a freebie with 123 tips on how to network properly. And so they can download it. I'm sure that the link will be shown soon, so they can download it. They can enter their email address and then they will get it into their mailbox.
Excellent. That is terrific. And you're right. Networking is a big piece of your branding, getting to build those relationships. There it is, 123 tips to becoming a networking ninja.
Yeah, and of course, I would love everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn, because then that way we can stay connected and we can follow each other and exchange wisdom and knowledge.
Excellent. And I also have a giveaway, which is a virtual setup guide, how to make your home office or office more appropriate on your next virtual meetings so you can really rock your next talk. And it's a virtual presenting tip sheet that has the 4 things that you must do to make sure you're set up for success. And now we also have a special deal for all of you who have stayed until the end. Big View is offering $20 off of their package. This promotion is available, and you can, I believe it's going to be, is it in the chat or it's on the QR? There we go. There it is. There's the $20 off. You'll see it's in the chat right now. If you click on that, you will immediately get that discount when you check out. And oh, there's an error in my giveaway URL. Oh, goodness gracious. You know what? Let me, I'm going to grab that URL, the correct one, and put that. Thank you for letting me know. While I get that done, if you could give us a last few words of advice on all of us building our executive presence, Veronique.
I think what is most important, that first of all, you think of the niche you are in yourself or the sector, and you try to find out what are the written, but especially the unwritten rules. And you also, ideally, you look at other colleagues that you admire and try to find out what they are doing different than you, what you might even learn from them. Also know that you can for sure enhance at least one or two things in each of the pillars that we've been speaking about: your gravitas, your communication, and your appearance. And also know that it's always about the other person. So you are very important, of course, but the other person in your interaction with others, it's always about the others. So try to give them the credit, or try for who they are. Try to adapt. Like I said, stay true to your own personality, but adapt to a situation where it's appropriate to behave this way or that way, or to dress this way or that way. Even when we were talking about speaking a different language, Sharon, when I speak French, when I speak Spanish, or when I speak German, or when I speak my own language, my tonality is different. The way I use my voice is different, because I try to copy the original as much as possible. And so all these different languages are spoken in a different way, using your mouth in a different way, using your voice in a different way. So those are the tips that I would like to end with, for sure.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Veronique. And we really appreciate all of the knowledge you shared with us. Everyone, thank you all so much. I just added my email in the chat. My apologies. I launched a new website last month and I realized that the URL now for that giveaway is now old. Bruno, I'll send you the new one in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, anybody can email me at hello@sharondelaney.tv and I will send you that virtual setup guide. With that, everybody, thank you so much. I'm waving at you, Veronique.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Now more than ever before, the way you communicate can make or break your career. Hi, I'm Sharon Delaney McLeod. I'm a television journalist turned speaker and facilitator, working with leaders and their teams to amplify their impact. In our hybrid world, it's crucial to connect with each other in meaningful ways. In fact, new research shows that effective communication has become the most vital competency and non-negotiable skill that modern leaders must flex to keep their teams engaged and productivity high. I invite you to follow my content for professional development best practices, podcasts, articles, and videos that will help you drive business results. I look forward to partnering with you in person or virtually to level up what I call your power skills. Hit the link below to start a conversation.